508. Here we are for lecture 9. We're going to talk about sociality, and the flip side of the coin is loneliness. And we've finally gotten to the fun stuff. We've scared you all semester with the biology and the terrible physical effects of stress and cortisol release and all of the many health problems you can have as a result of that. And now we're going to talk about the fun things, the interventions you can do, and the things that you can do to actually have a positive effect on your health and deal with things like stress. Sociality is really, really important. I want you to think, though, about the challenges that we face with sociality and the triggers that can cause loneliness. So think about transitions in life. Think about when you move from school to work, when you go from being single to being married, when you go from being childless to having kids, when you go from working to retiring. That's a huge, huge life transition. And as you get older, you may find that your social circle shrinks because maybe your family has moved away, maybe your friends have passed away and gotten old or sick and you aren't connected to them anymore. So every time we go through one of these transitions, or if we're working with patients or clients who are going through these transitions, we have to be mindful of the fact that these are triggers for loneliness and try to figure out effective interventions to help people stay socially connected. So I'm going to use a couple examples from our family. John's mom lived to be 95 years old, and she was mentally and for the most part physically doing really well right up until the last year or so. By living to be 95, though, she outlived most of her family and friends. But she had a social circle around her church. And so she made friends with new people who were 20 years younger.
And the credit union.
Yes, and with her job. So she had some friends that were long-lasting through her job. They used to go to Vegas together. They used to go to Palm Springs together. They used to go to Dodger games together. She was a Dodger booster. So she had these circles that kept her connected. And all of these people came to her funeral and her rosary and talked about the connection they had with her and the things that they did together. And it was really amazing to see how busy she stayed her whole life. Think about strategies to overcome a lack of social connection, being social through your hobbies, being social through volunteering in your community so that you're connected to your community, living in an age-friendly community. I always kind of joke that senior living communities are like college dorms.
That was our dog.
That's the dog, sorry.
Another part of social support. She's our social support animal.
Yes. So when you live in a senior living community, it's like living in a college dorm. You have meals together. You might have activities together. You're going to have hobbies and things like that together. So it's very, there she goes. Yeah. So it's very social. My aunt was a little bit of an introvert. Most of her social circle was in her job. And she was unfortunately forced to retire early because she developed early onset dementia and had a seizure disorder and a lot of health issues. So she wasn't able to live alone anymore. And we were trying to figure out what to do with her. Should she live with one of us? And we decided to try an assisted living facility. When she came in, because she was one of the younger people there, she was immediately embraced. She was in charge of the newsletter. She was in charge of greeting new residents. And she sadly developed lung cancer, didn't live for very long, but the last year or two of her life was very, very happy. And she was very socially connected. And it was really a great, great experience for her.
Right. So connecting back to the other part of the course, isn't she awesome too? It's my wife, Julia. So connecting back to the course is stress and cortisol, okay? And then the other part is, loneliness is, connected to all the diseases related to elevated stress and also elevated inflammation. So loneliness is an inflammatory disease as well. So we look at cardiovascular disease, we look at diabetes, we look at immune dysfunction, we look at autoimmune problems, on and on and on. They are exacerbated by loneliness. Okay.
Absolutely.
All right. So do you want us to go into the
in terms of,
module?
I just want to do a
Okay.
couple more things. So in terms of interventions, another thing that I think about is technology. And sometimes we underestimate, the IBM report talks about this, we underestimate the capability of older people to use technology to stay connected. During the pandemic, people who were living in assisted living facilities or who were living in nursing homes were forced to use FaceTime or iPads, Zoom, whatever, to stay connected to their families because we shut down many of those facilities to reduce the spread of COVID. So technology is really valuable. I'm a cancer patient. I connect with people all over the world through patient forums. So when you get older and you start to have chronic diseases, you can bond with people who understand your situation by connecting online with people. Doesn't matter where they live, they're going through the same thing you're going through. So that's
Again,
kind of
that's
helpful.
it's social support. It's not a club you want to be a member of, but people don't get it. As cancer is everybody else's problem until it's your own, and so and that's true of a lot of diseases. Being clinically depressed, people that are not depressed don't get it, and so finding these support networks actually are really beneficial.
Yeah. And then the last thing I wanted to say, what I hear from my students over the last year or two is that the pandemic was hard. A lot of students feel lonely. If you feel this way, you are not at all unusual. It's just that people don't want to show that vulnerability. They don't want to talk on Instagram or Facebook or whatever, or Snapchat about how they don't have any friends and they don't have anyone to do things with. But what I'm really hearing in this last school year is that the transition from being online to being back in person was very difficult for a lot of people. The extroverts said, we forgot how to be extroverted. We forgot how to be social. And now we're kind of uncomfortable in social situations and they're trying to figure a way back to their old selves. And the introverts said, hey, we were kind of happy being online and happy wearing masks and having that little bit of barrier and privacy. And now we're really having a hard time going back into the classroom and having to come out of our shells. So if you have been feeling that way, don't worry. It's very normal, and everyone's kind of going through the same thing.
It's not the quantity of relationships. It's just the quality. All you need is just all you need. If you have one good one, that's all you need.
Yeah. Okay. So I have a PowerPoint.
I have one good one.
One good one. I have a PowerPoint that I want to use just to keep me on track. And I did update it. So the one that was posted on Blackboard has changed.
Okay.
So John's going to pull that up.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Awesome. Yay. All righty. So this is just a graphic that talks about the many, how severe the health effects are of loneliness. So when it's the equivalent of smoking 15 cigarettes a day. We all know smoking cigarettes is bad for you, but people don't stop and think that being socially isolated is bad for you. You have a higher risk of dementia. You have a higher risk of depression. You have, a lot of seniors, a lot of people in general, 20% of the people in the U.S. report feeling lonely. 1 in 5, 1 in 4 seniors, that was in 2009, said that they felt lonely some of the time. My guess is that would have gone up during the pandemic. And when we think about why people become socially isolated, why people become lonely, as you get older, age is a factor. So your friends and family have died. You just don't have that big circle of friends anymore. You have chronic health problems. It's harder for you to get out.
Yeah, you're less mobile.
Yes, maybe you can't drive anymore. Maybe you're having difficulty walking. Maybe you're spending a lot of time. Sometimes with my situation, I feel like, whoa, all I do is go to the doctor. So you have these issues that take up all of your time. You may have family that you've lost contact with. And number 4 is living low income. Rich people get better stuff. If you're a rich person, you might have a cleaning lady that comes in once a week. You might have a gardener that comes once a week. You might have a home aide that comes and helps you get dressed or makes food for you. And so you're socially connected with these people. You might have really good health insurance. So if you wake up and your ear hurts, you go immediately to the doctor. And so you've got that social connection with the nurse and the doctor and everyone at the doctor's office. So
you have book clubs, you have dinner clubs.
Exactly.
All these things
you go on cruises,
so.
Rich people get better stuff. If you are low income, you may be more isolated. You may have less access to transportation. You may have less access to money to enjoy hobbies and things like that. And also changing family structures. We have fewer people are getting married. The divorce rate is fairly high, so we have some unstable family structures, and families get more and more complicated where people are married multiple times with kids with different people, and then it just gets a little bit complicated.
And reduced fertility on the young end, so there's not as many grandkids and nieces and nephews. There's just fewer around. So.
Okay, so let's go to the next slide.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, this does not appear to be the slide that I prepared, but right, it's okay. It's okay because I know what the slide says. The slide is about the Harvard study. So the Harvard study is 2 cohorts of people. So this was the Harvard long-term study we call it the happiness study. It's the Grant and Gluck study. It's been going on for over 80 years. And what they did is they took a bunch of guys from Harvard students that were sophomores at Harvard, and then they took a bunch of young men from the inner city, very poor neighborhoods of Boston. And they studied them. They've studied them for the past 80 years. So they've done medical exams, they've done surveys, they've done interviews, and they've collected an enormous amount of data. It's a very long-term longitudinal study of these people. And they've looked at what are the important factors that influenced health. Now, what are the weaknesses of the study? The weaknesses of the study are that it's all men, it's all white men. So we didn't see a diversity in terms of gender or ethnicity or anything like that. So that to me is a weakness. And of course, there's always a weakness when you're asking people to fill out surveys because people aren't always honest about things that are going wrong. But
this is a weakness of a lot of professional training. I mean, medical students for just very, very recently that a little bit of diversity has crept in. But, you know, a lot of the doctors that we all see now were trained in medical school based on data that came from white males.
Yeah. Now, the good news is that in 2022, 80 years after they started this Harvard study, they've now started a global, what they call the global flourishing study. And so now they're looking at people across the world from every continent. To over 2,000 people are enrolling in this study, and they will be looking at, you know, what are the things that make these people thrive, what makes them happy. So in another 80 years, we'll hopefully have good results. But with the Harvard study, I'm going to look at my notes to make sure I don't forget anything. 50 years into the study, they said, hey, maybe we should ask the wives what they think. So they added the wives to the study. So that's good. And now they have what they call the second generation study. So they've got 2,000 children of the original 700 plus men that they were studying, and they're looking at their lives. And what they found is that over this past 80 years, the number one predictor of who was going to thrive as they got older, who was going to age successfully, who was going to be healthy, who was going to be happier, is relationships. And the social connectedness that these people had with family, friends, and community.
Do you want me to pull up the article?
The article.
The IBM article.
No, I'm not to IBM yet.
Okay.
I'm talking about Harvard.
All right. Or do you want me to go to Harvard?
No, I want to stay at Harvard. I'm sorry.
I know this is not the PowerPoint slide.
It's not the right slide. Let me wing.
You're good with that? Okay. You know,
okay.
Potentially you need to upload the new PowerPoint.
I thought I did, but apparently sometimes in Blackboard you think you've done things.
Well,
it
won't overwrite. Sometimes you have to actually give it a new name. So
okay. I will do that. I will fix it. I promise. There's always a fix. Sometimes things just don't work out.
I want to be happy because we're going to talk about happiness and gratitude later on.
So good relationships are good for you. The quality of the relationships is important, so don't freak out. I'm more of an introverted person. John has never met a stranger. Everywhere we go, he makes friends. I mean, he's just amazing in that way. And I'm sure you students can all feel that vibe from him. But what's really important is the quality of your relationships, the feeling that you have someone that you can count on when things get bad. And so that's what I have with John. And hopefully he has that with me too. So
we have so many pictures of her helping me through all my orthopedic surgeries.
Yes.
And that's just one part of it.
And me through my cancer treatment.
That's
So
right.
when I was diagnosed and I was grappling with it, and I said to John, I just need to talk to you about how I'm feeling, and I'm gonna talk about some really hard things, and I just want you to listen and be there for me. And he was totally there. My mom, bless her heart, when I was not too long after I was diagnosed, she said to me, and she lived back east, she said, look, if you need anything, I'm on the next plane. I will be there for you. And of course, my heart just went, whoa. But at the time, I was very concerned about my children who were, I think, in 6th and 9th grade. And so I was worried about how my treatment and my illness is going to affect them. Obviously, we're doing great because they're 26 and 21 now. But anyway.
So she's had a good course. Again, rich people get better things. So we went.
We're not rich.
Rich enough that we went, we had the high-end insurance. So we went to the clinical trial at UCSD for her chronic lymphocytic leukemia. And got the best care that you can get in the world down there. So, in fact, we went to an infusion yesterday. So I go to every single office visit and every single infusion.
But anyway, when my mom said that, my cortisol levels dropped. And all of a sudden I was like, it's going to be okay. If things get rough, I have someone I can call on that will help me. She never had to do it. And honestly, her plate was full. She was taking care of my stepdad who was disabled. She didn't need to come out here and help me. But the fact that I knew she was there if I needed her was very, very meaningful. So quality matters. Conflict is bad. If you have a really conflict-filled relationship, it appears that getting divorced or getting, as John says, shed the assholes, getting rid of that person, getting that person out of your life may be better for you than dealing with ongoing conflict. A little bit of bickering and arguing is okay.
As you make up.
As long as you make up. But the best predictor of how someone was going to be doing at age of 80 was how satisfied they were with their relationships at age 50. And what they saw is that it had profound effects on the brain, so that people that had good relationships were less likely to develop dementia. Their memories were sharper. When they did have chronic illnesses, which can be inevitable as you get older, their perception of pain was less, and they felt happier than the people that were socially isolated and lonely. So all of those things are in that video, the TEDx video that Dr. Waldinger did.
And I'm going to jump there just to show you what she's talking about. All right, so we'll get right into that. Right down here. Okay, so I just gave you the gut interaction one, which is an awesome lecture as well. And so as we come down here, this is the PowerPoint slide that Julie may update, and then this is the video right here, okay, that talks about everything, which is, it's an explanation of the Harvard study, which is really, really cool.
And I think what happened with the PowerPoint is I loaded it in the other room, and he was already in Blackboard. So if you didn't refresh your browser, it would be the old version. So
sorry about that.
But anyway, that's okay. So anyway, let's go back to, so definitely watch the TEDx talk. It's only about 12 minutes long. It's definitely worth it. And a very famous study. So now we're going to talk about IBM. So IBM did this study, and you might ask, why does IBM care? Well, IBM probably wants to push technology as a solution to loneliness and aging, and I'm all for that. It's definitely one prong of the solution. But what they wanted to talk about is, why do we care about loneliness among the elderly? And why is it so important? It's so important because we see that the individuals who are lonely start to have chronic health problems as a result of their loneliness and the stress of being lonely. So they're more likely to develop dementia. They will live shorter lives.
Diabetes, heart disease, everything we've talked about.
So as those individuals start to decline, we have what we call a trickle-down effect. Their caregivers, their family members start to become overwhelmed with taking care of the older people that are starting to decline because they're isolated. Those caregivers then start to have problems at work. So it affects businesses who are trying to make sure, as I used to say when I was managing people, I just need to have butts in the chair. I need people to show up to work and get their jobs done.
That's why IBM did it.
Yes.
Because of the bottom line.
It is a productivity issue. So when you are a caregiver, and many of us are sandwiched between our children and our parents, and we're trying to help everybody at the same time. So those caregivers are overwhelmed. So they're missing time from work so that they can help their family members who are not doing well. The medical system gets overwhelmed. We don't have enough geriatric doctors. We don't have enough geriatric psychologists and psychiatrists to deal with the mental health issues. So the medical system gets overwhelmed. And then our government gets overwhelmed. Our communities get overwhelmed. Our businesses get overwhelmed. So you have this trickle-down effect where loneliness in an individual can trickle down and affect so many other aspects of society. And that's why it's important to care about social connection and loneliness. So you can go to the next one. Okay. So there's different triggers for loneliness. The individual triggers, the things that the individual experiences that may trigger them to become socially isolated, and then kind of societal factors that will make this person feel socially isolated. So as an individual, you will probably, as you get older, experience physical and cognitive declines in your abilities. It's just normal. I'm not the person I was 30 years ago. I'm happy with what I can do with my life, but things aren't quite the same anymore. But as I get older, there will be a point where I'm not going to be able to drive, or maybe I won't want to drive freeways, and my circle is going to get a little bit smaller. So as I start to experience more physical and mental changes, my ability to connect with the world around me may get more difficult. As I said before, like with John's mother, you may lose family and friends. Your family may die off, your spouse may die, your siblings may die, your parents die, and your circle starts to shrink. Your friends start to die as you get older.
And you have those superficial friends at work that disappear, because you've retired, So.
And really, when you talk about transitions, and I think that this, I don't want to be sexist, but it can be a difficult transition for men who have, society tells men that your identity needs to be your professional identity. And then when you transition to being retired, maybe you didn't have a lot of hobbies. Maybe you didn't have a lot of social circles. And so, so the men who are successful in terms of transitioning from work to retirement will work really hard to establish relationships as part of their retirement. And, I've been pushing, because we have a labor market shortage in a lot of countries, I've been pushing that we should be allowing people who are close to retirement age to maybe work part-time, a couple days a week, reduce schedules, and then that provides for maybe a little bit more successful transition to retirement in a lot of ways. Now, societal triggers. Being ignored or dealing with ageist issues in the media, in social media, in the marketplace, even though boomers and the silent generation, the generation above us, even though we have a lot of, I hate to say it, but we have the assets to spend. So we can go out and buy a car. We can go out and buy a house. Older people tend to have a little bit more money, not always, but most of the time. And yet, if you watch TV and you watch commercials, they tend to be trying to sell to people that are 20 to 45. So older people start to feel a little bit ignored. You may feel that you lack purpose in life. So if your career has ended and now you're retired, your children have moved away and have grown up and flown from the nest, your purpose in terms of your family members and your career may be reduced. And then there's I think, especially in the US, we have a problem with not respecting and valuing the wisdom that older people have. So
we did a recent trip to Costa Rica as a class for USC. It was a Maymester class, and it's worlds apart. Down there is a whole hierarchical respect system. It's amazing. The older people are truly valued, and we need to go back to the old ways, basically.
Yeah. So if I could change one thing about American society, I would change the fact that we don't respect and value the wisdom of older people enough here. And so that would make a big change too to people as they age. Okay. All righty. So this is a little bit complicated, but the basic thing is we have these obstacles to improving social isolation, because, what we need is a good way of screening for it. How do we figure out if someone's socially isolated, or if they're just not feeling well because of other illnesses, or are they depressed, or are they anxious? So we need good screening tools, and we need to educate our healthcare providers, our social workers, our workers in long-term care and assisted living, so that we're all looking out for older people to try to figure out, hey, is this person just, staying in their room and not coming out? So we need to figure out an effective screening method that accurately detects social isolation and doesn't, we don't want to have too many false positives or false negatives in terms of, oh, this person's tired because they're going through cancer treatment. They're not lonely, and we need to work on the stigma. I think this is a worldwide issue. When you get older, if you're not close to your family or you don't have friends, it's embarrassing to say, well, yeah, my kids don't call me anymore, or my, siblings don't care about me. It's very embarrassing for people. So there is that stigma to being lonely that we need to really work on. People understanding that, hey, we all get lonely sometimes, and we all may have a phase in our lives where we're not really connected, and it's okay to talk about it.
And the local communities, that's, we had an older couple next door, and we would make them dinner all the time, and we would always check in, and we'd take out their cans. Just a local community of support to help them with their loneliness and isolation. And I think that's a big part of where we fall apart in the United States.
I mean, we would always see them out on the street, and the man who lived next door was a pretty well-known UCLA football player. It's okay. and then he became a really successful high school and community college football coach, and we would talk football all the time. And so he loved talking football and talking USC football with us. And so that was a connection where we were appealing to his expertise in his life. And so that was really cool that we were able to bond with him on that issue.
And we're in blue zone mode, but there's a whole blue zone concept that was given a title, a name in Okinawa, Japan. They're called moais, and these are community families where we know that you have not just a family caregiver, but you have a network of community caregivers that you can rely upon.
Yeah, and they'll loan you money, they'll do caregiving, and it's
so we could do that.
Yeah, we could do that. So the ecosystem of solutions, we don't have a really well-organized solution. And so we need to kind of, especially in the US, we've got this long-term care system, we've got assisted living, we've got our government-provided Medicare, we've got local communities. We kind of need to get the stakeholders together to try to figure out solutions. And it's such a big issue in terms of designing age-friendly communities and making sure that there's support and making sure that we've got transportation for older people so that they can stay active in the community and volunteer and see their friends and things like that. There's so many different pieces to the puzzle. So we can go to the next. Okay. So this is just a little triangle that says, it kind of presents the challenges.
The goal is the heart happiness in the middle.
Yes, we got to get to the heart. How do we detect loneliness earlier and intervene more effectively? When someone goes to see the doctor can say, hey, how are you spending your free time? Are you going to church? Are you seeing friends? Have you left the house this week? It's got to be a very casual, comfortable conversation that the doctor, the healthcare provider has with the patient, so that they're not thinking, patients will lie if they're embarrassed, and just kind of, starting that conversation with the patient about how are you feeling.
And again, it's a neighbor. You see somebody you knew because your kids played baseball together 30 years ago. You see them in the grocery store. Reach out to them. So community can help a lot.
Yeah, I was thinking about that today because when our kids were little, John was the soccer coach for quite a few years, and I was kind of the team manager. And we still will be out in the grocery store, and people will walk up and say, "Hey, coach, how's it going?" And it makes us feel really connected to the community, so it's kind of nice. So how do we help people feel more engaged? we need to find ways, and this is not just with older people, but with everybody. We need to find ways to offer up opportunities for social activities, for people to engage in their hobbies. You know, we laugh about our dog and how she's our emotional, you know, our social support dog. When we walk our dog around our neighborhood, everybody knows who our dog is. And so we've met all of these people. People will talk to you. Strangers will talk to you when you have a dog, where they would never talk to you in California. They would never come up and talk to you as a stranger if you didn't have an animal with you.
And a lot of you guys have this kind of ongoing concept, like in different types of housing, assisted living facilities, where you can't have an animal, say, but you could always have people bring by animals, you know, and
sure, there's a lot of therapy dogs,
right.
and of course there's that whole service animal thing, you know, that we see a lot of dogs on campus at USC now because of service animals being allowed in housing.
It's an icebreaker, and it just makes you feel good.
So how do we help people create social vibrancy and vitality later in life? We need to make sure that we have age-friendly communities, age-friendly housing. We need to have good transportation. We need to have walkability to activities. We're getting ready in our city to build a new city center that will have housing and community activities, and then the library will be in the middle, and shops and restaurants. So, you know, try to have areas like that where it's very easy for an older person to walk to the drugstore, walk to the grocery store, walk to the movie theater, or, you know, walk to the park or something like that.
That's the future, you know, of architecture, civil engineering, you know, community design, you know, thinking about all this, because, you know, the age wave is only increasing. All right. Next slide.
Okay. So the last article that we had was just talking about the implications of loneliness. And of course, when we feel sad and lonely, there are positive things that we can do, and there are negative things that we can do. So the article talks about buffering your perceived stress, your loneliness that's creating stress, by finding a way to relax. Maybe that's watching Netflix. We have, during the pandemic, we
watched everything.
Yeah, we have watched everything. Not everything. I have a list on my phone.
We just started Umbrella Academy again.
Enjoying it quite a bit. So so we've been watching Netflix with our older son every night. We pick a show and we'll watch the season of that show. We just finished Stranger Things, you know. So anyway, humor, finding humor, being able to laugh, doing breathing exercises, and I love cognitive restructuring, redefining the situation. I always remember reading one time, when you're in traffic and you're stuck in traffic and you're going to be late for something and you're freaking out and you're thinking, oh, I'm having such a bad day. You need to think, no, I'm having a bad 5 minutes.
And you're going to come home to God's country.
Exactly. Exactly. The alternative, which many of us have also turned to during the pandemic, alcohol, missing work,
hey, you know what?
Smoking.
Let's go back to the Blue Zone, and they have a number of interventions, and one of them is called Wine at 5, baby. 2 glasses a day.
John tells me it's okay.
It is.
So, but just be careful. There are positive things that can be healthier ways of coping with the stress of loneliness. So let's go to the next one. Okay. I thought this was really great, because when I tell the story about my mom saying, if you need me, I'll be on the next plane out, and how amazing that made me feel, it was that perceived social support that was so good for my stress in that moment. And what was really interesting about this is actually getting high levels of support is bad for your stress. And it reminds me of a time. I'm gonna tell a story where I look bad. I was driving my son to high school, and I was giving him what I thought was very helpful advice. And he was very mad, and I didn't know why he was mad. And I finally said, why are you so mad? You have to tell me so that I don't do this again. And he said, well, it's because when you give me advice like that, it makes me feel like you don't think I can do anything on my own, that I can't figure this out on my own. And it was a real light bulb moment for me. And so I try to pull back a little bit. I still struggle with it. But anyway,
he's kind of a grumpy puppy.
So high levels of actual support may end up making people feel like they're incompetent. With older people, we have to be careful to respect their dignity and respect their independence, and don't overwhelm them with, I'm going to do everything for you. I'm going to figure out what you can do on your own and what you need help with, and make careful choices. So I thought that was a very interesting thing. But again, this perception of having social support, and it goes back to the Harvard, the TEDx talk that Dr. Waldinger said, knowing that you can count on someone is very, very important, and really is a hallmark of the quality of your relationship. So knowing that you can count on someone helps alleviate your stress. So that perception of social support is really, really important.
All right, so that's the overview of everything we have here. All right, very cool. Do you have any more things you can add to it?
No, but we will keep talking about amazing things that you can do to alleviate stress, whether you are 20 or whether you are 80. There are so many very useful and adaptable things to do, and it's a menu. So some things might work for you or your client or your resident or your patient, and other things might not. So you figure out what works.
Right. This week you've learned about improving your diet, right? Not eating too much, okay? So that's, again, the blue zone thing. They call it the 80% rule. So you eat slowly, and then you slow down your roll, and it's better for you, and you eat more of a plant-based diet. Julie talked about sociality, right? We're going to get into music therapy, exercise, meditation, and gratitude. All these are going to be just this new toolkit that you're going to be able to relate back to everything we talked about here, that is the physiologically damaging parts of behavior.
All righty.
All right, very cool. We'll see you guys next time. Don't worry about the exam. You guys are going to kill it. All right? Bye.
Right on.